Now
Thank
we're going
you.
to go back to one of our other big stories, the news that the government's decided to maintain the Chinese technology company Huawei's involvement in the UK's excuse me, 5G networks. The firm will, however, be banned from supplying parts to sensitive areas of the infrastructure known as the core, and it'll be excluded from sites near near military bases and nuclear installations. Well, Dr. Stephanie Hare is a specialist in cybersecurity, author of a forthcoming book, Technology Ethics. I'm really glad someone else is going to do some talking for a minute. What is your take on the announcement we saw today?
Well, it's been heavily trailed, and in some ways we haven't really moved positions of the pieces on the chessboard in a year. So the United States has wanted a full ban, as has Australia. So 2 of the Five Eyes intelligence sharing countries, right? So that's the US, Canada, the UK, Australia, New Zealand have had the closest intelligence sharing relationship since the Second World War. 2 out of 5 have banned Huawei already. Canada and New Zealand are on the fence waiting, and then the UK has just come out with its announcement today. So none of this is a surprise in terms of what we thought was going to happen. The real question is the United States bluffing? Because the United States has said if the UK does this, it will restrict intelligence sharing.
Well, obviously the UK must think it, Boris Johnson and his team must think it's bluffing, because you would have thought in a hierarchy of awful things to happen, to lose the Five Eyes would be a very bad thing to happen. Not to mention the possibility of damaging the prospects for a free trade agreement.
Exactly. And we have seen the response from many US senators. And of course, we have Secretary of State Mike Pompeo arriving tomorrow for a meeting with the Prime Minister. We will be looking to see if this is just anger and bluster, particularly ahead of a US presidential election at the end of this year, or if this is serious. So what we want to do is separate noise from signal and start looking for concrete moves. So first, we want to see if the US is actually being serious in its own backyard. There's a little bit of Huawei kit still in the United States, and there's a bill working its way through Congress right now that would federally fund to the tune of $1 billion the removal of Huawei entirely from the United States. If they do that, and if another bill that's also going through Congress passes, which is to say it would restrict intelligence sharing by law with any country that has Huawei in their networks, then the US would be legally compelled not to share intel with the United Kingdom.
Which would be a very striking development. I mean,
Yes,
there's a lot of talking in the world about decoupling between US and China tech, but we don't typically talk about any decoupling between the US and the UK.
Indeed.
Watch that space. On the actual announcement made by the British government, this attempt to square the circle, to kind of have cake, eat cake, etc., do you think that their discussion about promoting rivals to Huawei, only allowing it 35%, only allowing it in non-core areas, so on and so forth, is this a plan that will work in the long term to protect UK national security?
Well, the fact that the UK has classified Huawei today as a high-risk vendor, and we saw the Financial Times reporting today that the Five Eyes partners, of which the UK is obviously one, are going to work together to try to come up with alternative vendors. They accept that they would not be able to even start getting those new entrants until another 3 years. But the goal is to get the high-risk vendors, for which we can read Huawei, out of the system entirely. That tells me that the United Kingdom wants to get Huawei out, can't afford to do it now, technically doesn't feel it's possible to do it now, and so they're going to play a long-term strategy. So tensions within the Five Eyes are clearly happening, but what we're really going to be looking at is, can we solve the risk? Can we solve the problem? Obviously, even if you remove Huawei, there will still be cybersecurity risks to the United Kingdom, but leaving it in the network and recognizing that it's so risky that it can't be involved near nuclear sites, military installations, that's going to leave a lot of people wondering, well, what about other places in the United Kingdom that might be at risk? It leaves a lot of questions unanswered.
A lot to think about. Thanks so much for coming in to talk to us about it.